Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes. Doesn't seem that long since James and I spoke about last night's game, but this afternoon, we're also joined by John Hughes. A frustrating night, John, for Celtic last night in the Champions League.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of frustration in different areas here, isn't there? It depends how you want to break it down. There's a frustration of the game itself. Then there's a frustration of the fact that we should never have been in that position. There's frustration of the fact that we're posting, Scottish record financials and spending hee-hawing players. So there's lots of frustration to go around if that's what you're looking for. But look, the reality is that at half-time last night, or at least just before half-time, I was pretty pleased.
Yeah.
I thought the boys dug in well. I was pleased with the way they were set up. I was pleased with the way they defended. We couldn't get hold of the ball. It was bouncing off our midfielders. We just couldn't get hold of it. There was a lot of long balls. It was very scrappy. We were fighting for second balls, bouncing balls. We just couldn't seem to get it down and play for long parts of the game. But they have a say in that as well. They're a good side. So they're making it very difficult for us. But up until Matt O'Reilly, and to be fair to Matt, it was a poor challenge, but you could see he was tired. Just a minute before half time, he just threw out a careless, tired leg, and gave away that free kick. Mm-hmm. But until that point, there was lots to be happy about. The one bright point is if CCV practices hard, he might one day be as good as Liam Scales. So
Beckenbauer, aye.
He's the new Anthony Ralston.
Well, listen, we love a comeback. We love a comeback, John.
But great to see. And looked the most assured.
He did
on the pitch. He was the one predicting, where the ball was going. He was the one sweeping things up. He was the one. He was absolutely brilliant, to be perfectly honest. That didn't stop in the second half either. It wasn't his fault. He played a blinder, that boy.
He did.
I've said before, I can't stand people that slag players and then just hide and wait for them to have a bad game again and then slag them again. I didn't want Scales anywhere near the team, wow. What a player he's turned into now. Isn't that brilliant to see? And the problem is, you think we'd learned our lesson with Ralston, but those occasions are few and far between. Let's be honest, if we didn't have an injury crisis, Scales would be gone.
Yeah, he would.
He'd already be out the building. Yeah. He wouldn't be here. And talk about taking your chance. What a performance that was. Against really good opposition. His distribution was excellent for the most part. His defensive work was excellent. The boys, he has taken on. So that, for me, the biggest highlight of the night, quite easily, was Scales' performance. Because once he gets a more mature partner in next to him, that's potentially a very, very solid defensive partnership. So that's a big highlight. And again, even when we were defending in proper, it looks like the way people defend against us. We had proper bank of 4, bank of 3. It was good stuff. And the high press was excellent. They're putting them under pressure all the time. It was like they weren't ready for the high press. They were not prepared for that high press at the start. And Kyogo nearly got us a goal out of that as well. So look, there was lots to like, and I don't want to just launch in and how frustrating it was and all the rest of it. We always try to be balanced, so there's no point in just getting on your horse and ranting. Let's start with the good points. The first half was really, I thought was a very good performance in the circumstances. It's not as if we've been playing well.
No.
So and we have had an injury crisis, and that has affected us quite markedly now. So let's just start with that positive.
the thing is, John, like you say, when you, particularly right after the game, when you're trying to analyse what's gone wrong, and it obviously has gone wrong because we lost the game, it can be frustrating. You can react. You can be very reactionary in your views. The dust has settled a wee bit. You look at it and you think to yourself, right, let's try and pull some positives from last night. Some people might think that there were no positives. The recruitment's to blame. The board have let us down. I've seen a lot of that, and I get it. And I think that there's an element of it. But in terms of positives, you're starting off with Scales. Graham Cotter agrees with you. I was talking to you last night, James, and I said, imagine we were to try and come up with our partnerships in the order that you would select them in at the beginning of the season once we've signed Nawrocki, once we've signed Lagerbielke. Where do they all sit? Phillips is a strange one because he's come in as an emergency. You've got Carter Vickers and Nawrocki, I thought was your first choice centre-half partnership with Nawrocki coming in to replace Starfelt. You've got Welsh and Lagerbielke as backups. Then, as John says, you've got guys like Scales who you thought were going to leave the building, Kobayashi, they're kind of fourth, fifth choice. You've got Iwata can play there. You've got Phillips coming in. So somewhere along the line, Scales would have been fifth choice centre-half. Yet he stood up against Rangers. He played well against Dundee. And last night, he was one of the shining lights, if you like. It was one of the positives, wasn't he?
Yeah, I said before the game on the pre-match broadcast, this would be the game where you can really tell how far Scales' progress has come in the last few weeks. Against Rangers too, just been an absolute anomaly. He could have come in at Rotterdam and Bodo Glimted it as he did in that away game in Norway a few seasons ago, but he didn't do that. He was probably our best defender alongside Alistair Johnston in the team. I thought he was winning a lot of his aerial duels well. It's the same sort of warrior-like performance that he put in against Rangers. And I thought, I've made the point on the pre-match that I thought his passing range was really good against Dundee last weekend. I thought you were seeing some similar things as well today. It was a lot of his long passes to the midfield, to the wingers, the wide men were really good as well. It was a strange game because it was the usual sort of scapegoats in the team, the likes of your Liam Scaleses that were the top performers last night, where your usual consistent top players, your McGregors, your Kyogos, your Hitatis were the players that were perhaps a bit off the boil. But I don't think you can point the finger at the players or the manager too much. It's two moments of madness that cost the team in what was a relatively comfortable performance. I thought we were in the game, we were competitive. I thought we had the better, higher quality of the chances in the first half, even considering they got the goal. On the goal, I've seen a lot of blame going on Joe Hart. I think he did leave a bit of space, but the ball can't be going through. It goes through far too easy. I don't know why Kyogo, probably the smallest player in the park, is in the middle of the wall. Yeah. And he makes sort of run to the side as if he's going to attack, as if it's like an attacking free kick. It was a really strange situation, but just on Liam Scales, I thought he stepped up again. I think this game was a real indicator of how far he's coming. You'll be thinking when your Carter Vickers and your Nawrocki's come back, will Scales still be in the team? Because if his performance levels don't drop, then surely he won't be dropped either.
Well, this is the big question because there's always that niggling thing in your back in mind. And I think we had it with Ralston when he came in. It proved so many doubters wrong. But I think the general opinion was we still need better. And obviously we went out, we get Juranovic, we get Johnson. We've got loads of centre-halves, that's for sure, once they're all fit and up to scratch. There's loads to discuss. I want to pick up on one of the things that John said about the high press, John. Not only was I surprised at just how high we were pressing them, I was surprised that Hitati was so high up the park as well. Why was I surprised? It's not because I don't think he's capable. I just felt to myself, he's just back. He's probably not at the peak kind of fitness and sharpness to do that role. I would think to myself, switch it up. Kyogo can do that kind of thing. Maeda can do that thing because they're so fit. They're so high level, high intensity. I was surprised that Tati was used in that particular role. And I do think he ran out of steam as well, John.
Well, it was obviously told. I mean, that's one of the major deficiencies in his game, is he doesn't press. And we discussed this before when it was O'Reilly seemed to be bigging up David Turnbull. And, for me, that sounded a lot like O'Reilly didn't like playing with Hitati. And if you look at the stats, if you listen to likes Alan Morrison, if you look at the stats, the then Hitati's stats for pressing are extremely poor, amongst the worst in the team, worse than Abada, for instance. So you can understand why the likes of OReilly doesn't like playing with them, especially when they're under pressure. So he was obviously told, was given quite clear indication what we had to do. They were pressing as a line of three, and it was great to see. But I don't think there's much doubt that's got to be Hitati's worst performance in a Celtic jersey. He was hopeless for most of that game. I'm very, very surprised he made it to the 57th minute. He didn't appear to be offering anything at all. He was at the heart of most of the breakdowns. His distribution was awful. At one point in the 23rd minute, I think it was, I was just looking back at my notes, he loses the ball, he turns into trouble in midfield, loses the ball, gets it back on the edge of the box, immediately fluffs it again. I mean, he completely lost his composure. So I think he had a night to forget. We know he's a good player, but he was nowhere on it last night. He was a man down. And then, unfortunately, because he was a man down, we end up in a man down because Home came on with a Begbie tackle and taken for no reason at all, just threw the pint glass off the banister over the banner. It was just madness. So, we had an empty jersey and then we had an invisible jersey. So that was the consequences of Hitati not playing well turned out to be far more serious than just his having a bad game.
You're right, because there was that knock-on of him being replaced by Home, and then that happened. And I do want to talk about it. It was mentioned after the game by Brendan Rodgers, James. Obviously, after the game, you were working on some blogs. I was doing the audio side of things, and we were watching the Brendan Rodgers post-match. And, there was two things that I found quite interesting. The first one was, it comes down to inexperience of Gustav, maybe inexperience overall, but also the inexperience of him being quite a new player to Celtic. I know he's played a few games, probably more than he expected at this stage. Just leave it because Hart had it covered. He doesn't have to be competing. He doesn't have to get involved in what resulted in his sending off. The Home one was rash. It was undisciplined. For me, there was 2 points of contact. There was the studs up on the ankle, the follow through under the knee, which was actually, it looked worse. It was just a really rash challenge. Can we put it down to inexperience, James? Because, I mean, you often think a club like Celtic, if you're on the bench, if you're part of that squad, you have to be ready for a challenge like Champions League. I just felt last year we were building up the experience of the squad, and it's almost like, right, we brought a whole new batch of players in who have to try and get up to that level again. On the wing, you've got Palmer, you've got Home coming on, never played at this level. Lagerbielke's the same. So it's quite frustrating in the respect that you thought you were building up the experience in the squad, and you've got a whole new raft of players who have to build it up again.
Yeah, it was. I found myself nodding along with almost the entirety of Brendan Rodgers' post-match interview. Yeah, I'm not too sure. Is it a 2-game ban for Odin Holm? Because it's a straight red. Is that right for 2 games? He would have signed. You would have been wanting them to build up this Champions League experience, and that's basically half the campaign gone from. So it'll be a gutter for him, and it's an option down in the midfield, but it really was an experience, and then fans will look to the board for that. But when you consider that Lagerbielke is a 4th choice centre back, or even a 5th choice centre back at that, he wouldn't have been starting that game if Celtic's centre back options hadn't completely disappeared with injury. So yeah, it's definitely an experience. He's got to just shepherd it back to Joe Hart. You can see for like a good 2 seconds as the guy's coming in the box, that ball is Joe Hart's to get. He throws the arm up. I've seen people saying it's a bit soft, but he's completely checked him in the box. You're giving the referee the decision to make. And I think it was the same with Holm as well. I've seen people saying that was soft as well. It studs into the shin and they follows through with the knee just below his knee as well. And it was definitely 2 red cards. And that's where the game changes, because as much as the backs might have been against the wall and Feyenoord might have looked a better team in the first 15, 20 minutes of that second half, Celtic were still only 1 goal behind.
I know.
1 chance, 1 breakaway, 1 counter-attack. With the pace that we've got in the attack, you can level things up pretty easily. And it was a complete capitulation in the space of 5 minutes, which is pretty much cost us the game.
No, you're right. You look at those moments that you're talking about, that short period of the game. Lagerbielke, 63 minutes sent off. Home, 68 minutes sent off. And then the second goal for Feyenoord in 76. And it's within that period. What I'm going to say here, if anybody is looking at the decisions, John, I'm just of the view that, right, we could argue all day about Lagerbielke, whether or not he should have got sent off, whether or not he should even have been involved in it. But if you're going to take the VAR decisions in terms of the disallowed goals, if you're going to take them, you're going to have to take the whole lot, because I thought the VAR we saw last night was a vastly improved version of the VAR we put up with domestically. Even the graphics, John, there was no doubt about the offside because it showed you it in 3D. Technicolor, it was like, that's offside, this is why. There was no big Crayola lines down the screen and all this kind of stuff. So if you're going to take the offside goals, you're going to have to take the red cards as well.
Well, I mean, you can argue that some of those, that one that was given for offside, they're mistaken. Was it the second one they got given for offside? There was a guy in the near side who was clearly offside, but the way he put the ball in the net was not. I mean, he really didn't look offside at all. So take that quite happily, falls in our favour. But the one thing, as you say, is at least it's been done right.
Yeah.
You know, especially before the offside decisions, you know, it's a straight line. And, you know, nobody's sitting there with an Etch-a-Sketch, you know, trying to work their way around the man. So, you know, just the Scottish version of it, yeah, I think it was that Liam said ages ago, if you're not going to bring it in properly, don't bring it in at all. Because it's a joke, the one that we have. And so, you know, it was miles better and it really put us to shame in terms of domestically speaking. But you do have to take those decisions, and they are soft, but they always look worse, especially the sending offs. They always look worse in slow motion. So you would have got away with that back in the day, but not now. And the thing about Gus is, as people noticed at the weekend, the Dundee game, he's brutally slow. So guys edging in front of him is always going to be a problem. So he's obviously developed the habit of just getting the arm across. Mm-hmm. You know, it's obviously, for him, he's going to have to learn how to deal with that, and hopefully once he gets used to playing better players, he'll develop a technique in order to do that. I mean, as you say, there wasn't really much point in doing it in the first place. But, you know, again, home, and this is the point, is two inexperienced players. And this is where you come back to the recruitment and the frustration. And we don't, you know, I mean, obviously I've made my position on that very clear, and what I thought of the window very clear. You know, and then we post record profits, Scottish record profits, and how much have we spent on players? And then what I find frustrating with the support is you then have a whole load of guys who just come in and say, oh, well, it's the best we can do. We can't do any better than that. You know, it's so difficult to get people here. You know, a wage structure and all this. Yeah, it's difficult. That's why you pay millions of pounds for someone to do the job.
You've got a whole team. You've got a whole team.
If it was easy, I could do it.
I know.
Do you know what I mean? And you know, we've scouts all over the world. We've got an incredibly highly paid manager. We've got Mark Lawwell sitting in there. Are you telling me that in the whole world we can't find a group of players for the kind of money that we have knocking about now in order to improve things? And but we have to. I tweeted out there. Apparently, we have to keep a big reserve of cash because we might not qualify. Do you know how you're not going to qualify? By keeping a big reserve of cash that you should be investing in the players. That's how you end up not qualifying. So it's just an absolute nonsense, and especially given this year, the rewards at the end of this year, the potential for some sort of European league, obviously in the back of that, because that's inevitably the way this is going down the line, and we need to be in that. You know, we can't just put the money in the biscuit tin and hope, you know, we'll keep that for a rainy day. It's only speculation if you don't have the money. We have the money. It's investment, right? And we must be the only business that I can imagine that does not have a specific business plan, specific targets, accountability, KPIs, all of that for progressing in Europe. Because even with the best will in the world, let's say this model stays exactly the same. What progression are we ever going to have? If we just keep on, I don't know how many times I've got to say this, if we just keep on, spending £1.5 to £3 million on project players, how are we ever going to progress? We have to be buying potential on an increasing gradient. So the project players we should be buying now should be £5 million, right? Because we have the money to support that. That's how you progress. That's how you slowly build up. No one's suggesting throwing £20 million, or £15 million at players, because that's never going to happen. But the risks that we take must be better reflected in the resources that we have. It's just not good enough. Not good enough by any stretch of the imagination. And the fact that that statement accompanied the accounts was outrageous, in my view. And we've got this money. You know what we're doing with it? We're just going to keep it. Just in case.
Just in case we don't qualify. Now, the thing is, nights like last night do shine a light on it, John. So it's a discussion we're going to have today, because we're not going to just lead on it, and it's not going to be the sole purpose of today's show, but it is part of it. And James and I were talking again last night around not just the recruitment in this transfer window, but the recruitment all last season. And probably buying your guys for development. I mean, it was mentioned players that can be developed, is the exact words that was used in the statement from Peter Lawwell, against players who can make an immediate impact. And the immediate impact players, I don't think we signed enough of those type of player in this window. I think that the developing players should have been signed last season. And like John says, find me an Alistair Johnston that can play left back. Go and find him. I don't care what part of the world he plays in, James. Go and find me an Alistair Johnston style player that can play left back, who's not going to be pushed off the ball domestically, never mind in Europe, who's not going to be targeted every single time we come up against any team, because physically he can't withstand the challenge. Last night, Feyenoord just kept playing balls down to Greg Taylor, and if it's off the ground, he's losing the ball. He's not winning a header. And so what I want an AJ style player playing on the left-hand side. We spent about $4 million on Bernabe last season. The boy's he's not made it. I'm sorry, he's just not made it for Celtic. That money, I don't know how many times we're going to do that. We need, and you can't go back and say every signing is going to be spectacularly successful. I get that, but I want a better record than we had from the players that were signed last season. You go back to Angie's first season, how many of them were flops? 2? McCarthy and Ideguchi, maybe. All the rest of them made an impact. That's the kind of record we need. And I don't think we had it last season. And then you're asking guys like Holm and Palmer even, and Yang and Lagerbielke to make an impact at a level that they're probably not ready for yet. They're maybe ready for Champions League a couple of seasons down the line, but they're getting thrown in because I think we've been a bit lax when it comes to recruitment, James. What's your take on it?
Yeah, I think Big John echoed my views. I've been saying it for a while. If you're looking at the bigger picture rather than just honing in on the game, Celtic should have been progressing the transfer strategy year on year, but instead we're using the same transfer strategy that we adopted about a decade ago. You should have been gradually building the money up. We should be spending about £5 to £8 million on players. That's what these teams from your outside of the usual top 5 leagues, your teams like your Portos, your Benficas, your Ajaxes, your teams like that, they've gradually built their way up, they've worked their way up, and they're selling players for crazy money now. If you think back to about a decade ago, Celtic fans would have been holding themselves in the same regard and the same level at these teams. Nowadays, these teams are buying players for 30, 40 million and selling them for 80 to 90 million, whereas we are still at the same level. We've not gone forward at all. And the team isn't going to progress forward. It took Feyenoord of about 2 to 3 minutes to see, we've worked to try and get this Alistair Johnston guy. We can't get past him. Let's go at this Taylor guy now. And then they went at Taylor for almost the entirety of the game. You shouldn't be going into a Champions League game with clear weaknesses in the team, a clear point of attack for the opposition to go at. But we did, and you're getting exposed down there time and time again. And I've seen Palmer getting a lot of stick. I don't think that's really fair. People are saying he's no Jota replacement. Celtic aren't going to replace Jota. I'm sorry, you can't replace him like for like. He's a £4 million player. Jota's a £25 million player. He's not going to set the world alight straight away. As you said, he's signed as a development player. But you would have hoped that more first-team quality players would have brought in, even going back. If you look at the left-back situation, we've got Greg Taylor. There was plenty of other fullbacks in Scotland you could have got there, but there's a bit of a snobbery from Celtic fans towards signing players from other teams in Scotland, turning their nose up at the likes of a Lewis Ferguson, who's now written it up at Bologna. And you're like, oh, I'll take him now that he's doing it somewhere else. Same with your Aaron Hickeys and your Josh Doigs. It's a bit of a snobbery when we could have been the team that took the chance on them. We could have reaped the benefits of that.
No, you're right. And by the way, I think if you go through Acsom, quite a few of us are probably guilty of it. I think Lawrence made a good point yesterday in relation to the fact that we're backed ourselves into a corner now with the homegrown rule, where we might have to be forced to go and buy a few Scottish players to make up the quota, because Turnbull's coming to the end of his current deal. McCarthy's not got a future at Celtic. There's players
keep missing the boat. We're missing the boat on these players. They keep going elsewhere.
I know. The Hickey one was frustrating.
The good generation of players that have come up in the last sort of 3 to 4 years, they've all gone now. So we're going to need to wait a couple of years for the next generation, next crop of talent to come through.
I know. And you think to yourself, why is the next crop of talent, why is the next cycle not coming through at Celtic as well? That's a deeper kind of conversation to have. Jungle Lion, Groundhog Day again. Our record away from home is simply not good enough. And we do have the same conversations, not quite being ready, John, for the first Champions League encounter. The game I spoke about last night was when we spent 10 million quid and it was all on the bench. Julien and Ball and goalie. We just weren't ready for the campaign.
Well, someone tweeted me last night to make the point today, and making it now, this learning curve, we've been on this learning curve so long that it's essentially a circle. And we're just going round in circles. And that's what's happening. And it's because we keep resetting to zero every year. We don't have a plan for progression. And it is always going to be Groundhog Day. If someone can explain to me what the plan is to get better in Europe, well, you bring in Brendan and just pray that he can turn some of these players into stars. Is that the plan? Is that the extent of the plan? We're just, quality's got nothing to do with it, and we're always on this learning curve. This is a treble-winning team. Mm-hmm. Now, we're missing 3 very good players, but it's still a treble-winning team. And we have done nothing to strengthen it in terms of first team. So, yeah, look, at centre-back, but centre-backs are obviously important, but of the one that are injured, you're talking CCV maybe would have done better in there. We wouldn't have maybe not given away that penalty, that sort of thing. So ifs and buts are candy and nuts and all the rest of it. But what we know is we did not bring in enough quality. And we didn't do it last year, as you say, the second year. All of our big successes were actually from Ange's first year, weren't they? So, we haven't done it for a couple of years. But to do that, that's fine. We've had to put up with that in the past because we didn't have the money. We didn't have the resources. It was putting the club at risk. And, you just had to suck it up. But those days are past. Those days are long, long gone. So for people to say, oh, we've been worse. Of course we've been worse. But the finances were worse. The situation was worse. The management was worse. Lots of things in life have been worse. It's like, complaining about, maybe a first world problem today. Say, oh, the bus is late. Oh, the bus is late. Well, it wasn't that way during the war, let me tell you. It's absolute nonsense to just be going back to the worst periods of our, you could easily say, for instance, those boys dug out a brave 2-0 last night at the end because we have been pumped with 11 men on the pitch in situations before. But again, this situation is different. We're supposed to be building from a position of success with record-breaking resources. Yeah. So I just do not accept that, it's just, we can't do it in Europe, that's no problem. We can't do this, we can't do that, we can't achieve that. Rangers have, when nothing compared to what we have, twice since Seville, right? So I just don't accept this argument. And frankly, for all the people that use that argument, oh, we just can't do any better, I don't even know why if you're on here discussing things, I don't even know why you are, because effectively what you're saying is, it doesn't matter. There's no point. why do we even turn up? Why do we even fulfil the fixture? Because there's just no point, because we can never do anything. That's not an attitude that I accept. That's so defeatist.
Not only that, John,
I just don't accept it.
You're sitting there with the top on with the star. It's not as though we don't have a heritage, we don't have a tradition of European success in the past. And that's frustrating.
That is frustrating. Obviously, I am frustrated. I don't know if you've noticed. But, I just find it absolutely infuriating. I find it infuriating that we accept it. I find it infuriating that it's done to us to the point that we end up arguing as fans about what, levels of rubbish that we have to accept. It's just not good enough. Not now, when we are strong. We had a strong team, we have strong financials, and we just didn't make the effort to progress. It's not good enough.
It's pushing on from that platform, from that position of strength. That's the frustration, right? And you come up against the Feyenoord side, and I know that it's different in the Dutch league, but I just think that we could have done so much better last season and this season in the transfer windows. You lose Moy, right? So how do you replace Moy? Well, I was of the view that Brendan Rodgers could get extra out of a player like O'Reilly or Hitati or even Turnbull, whereby Moy isn't missed as much because someone else is actually taking their game to another level. You lose Jota. Okay, we replace him with a number of wingers. None of them are going to be a like for like, because Jota was a 2-year project for Celtic. It was actually a 3-year project, and we got the bid earlier than we expected. You're not replacing Jota, but what you can do is you can bring in a player who, in terms of taking on a player, gives you that extra dynamic, James, because we don't have that with Maeda or even Abada. So I think we've tried to do that with Yang. We've tried to do it with Palma. I think Tillio's that type of player. He looks as though, when he finally pulls on a Celtic jersey, he could make an impact. And then you lose a player in Starfelt who, for all the stick that he got, it's more about the partnership he had, James, with Carter Vickers. This season, we've not had a central defensive partnership to talk of. I mean, the amount of permutations we've had. So you were in the pre-season presser with Brendan Rodgers. You hadn't long taken the job. And you asked the question, James, about European progression. And I didn't even think that you were given a really clear answer. You almost gave him a line. You were saying, what does it look like? A win? A win away from home? What does European progression look like? It's almost as if the club aren't quite sure themselves, or they're certainly not willing to tell you what their idea of that is.
Yeah, one of the first, when Rodgers first came in, we were all keeping an eye on his early interviews and his early sort of media work. And one of the main points he was honing in on was European ambition. And I don't think we saw that in the transfer window. We were even more excited by the reports and the rumours of a 30 million war chest that could be there to be spent. And again, we didn't see that, despite getting an extra 25 million added onto that for Jota. I thought, when you're looking at the wings, I thought Abada would have been the man to step up. We know he doesn't really take on a man like Jota did, but I was hoping he could step up and replace the quality that Jota brought to the attack, because he's only 21. He's an absolutely phenomenal player. We had a bit of a slow start to the season, and then he gets that injury. So there's going to be a lot of pressure on these backup players to step up, the likes of your Palmers, your Tillios, your Yangs. We've signed a lot of quantity there. I think we needed bodies in at the wings, but when you lose Jota, you need to buy a big quality player who can take on a man, and it'll remain to be seen if the players that we've brought in so far are that. We've heard good things about Marco Tillio from the guys at Celtic Down Under. I don't know when he will be into the team yet. We don't know when we're going to see him. Will it be October, November? I think we're going to have...
Yeah.
I think the rumours are Carter Vickers will be back the middle of October, so we'll be keeping the fingers crossed there. But with Lagerbielke out suspended for the next Champions League game, Lazio at home, you're looking at Liam Scales and who? Tomoki Iwata? Is young Joe Morrison that was on the bench, is he going to be thrown into the team a la Dane Murray against Midtjylland a few years ago? It's impossible to prepare for a scenario like that. Celtic could have been better prepared, but I think to use things like that as an example is just wrong.
Can I just say one thing, Paul John? The reason why, for me, logically, under Ange, I wasn't as frustrated, because he had such a specific way of playing, and he was buying players to play that way. So everyone could see what the logic was. Some of the players that didn't work out tended to be the players that you sort of thought, well, how's he going to fit in? And as young James pointed out a couple of weeks ago, he never gets excited when we bought a defensive midfielder because he's never going to get a game. So that puts paid to the likes of Abelgard and all the rest of it. But when you are buying players, not just good players or possibly good players, or they might be decent, when you're buying them to do a specific job, it makes it easier, in my view, for the individuals to become greater than the sum of their parts. So the team becomes much stronger because these guys are bought to do a specific job and can do that job. They might not be able to do a whole load of other things, but because they've been bought that way, then I think the team is stronger perhaps than the individual players within it. I'm not entirely sure what way we're playing at the moment. Obviously, he's looking for people who are adaptable, but it's not quite that specific. So it's harder then to identify, who you want to bring in, where the gaps are, and what you want them to do. Because, do you want fullbacks that can invert? Because we're back at it last night. We're back at it on against Dundee as well. Now AJ isn't inverting as far as I can see. It's all Greg Taylor. So I know there's a version of that being played by managers down south. People discussing the tactics of that, where effectively you're a back three when you're in possession, and Taylor's going on to join the midfield. So, maybe we're a version of that. So what kind of fullback do we need now? Do we need someone who can do that job, or are we just looking for a traditional guy? Or, do you know what I mean? So I think when you're filling a very specific role, it's much easier to recruit for that role.
Yeah, what your point about the inverted fullbacks, I was thinking back to how we did it before Johnson was at the club, and I remember Ralston on many, many occasions coming into the position of an inverted fullback. I just didn't think he was as effective as Taylor in that role. I always thought Ralston was better as an overlapping fullback, and hitting the byline and zipping over. And Johnson, for me, is far more suited to that role rather than in the inverted. So you're right. Your strongest defender isn't playing the role. Your weaker one is.
The times he was tucking inside was when we went down to 9 men. He kept having to come across to make up almost what was one of the most narrow defences I've ever seen, just to try and, because we're having to follow the ball, we're having to follow any man that was in the box. If things were getting a bit messy, that's probably the only time we saw him starting to invert.
Things were getting messy. 2 goals disallowed, a saved penalty, 2 red cards, all that drama. But at the end of it, what I tried to take from Rodgers' post-match press conference was what he was saying was, we've come up here against the Pot 1 team. It's away from home. There's guys in there who don't have a great amount of game time this season who have started the game. You've got a makeshift defence. Yet we didn't throw in the towel. The 9 men that finished that game, surely that's a positive, James. The fact that they didn't capitulate in terms of it going 4-5-6-0. Callum McGregor spoke about that as well. They did stand up to it. It wasn't pretty, but it would have been easy for them to throw in the towel. They didn't. And I think that if indeed we get the injured players back to full fitness and we have a better campaign than the way it started, that could be pivotal in terms of goal difference. I mean, that could have easily been a 4-0 defeat last night.
Yeah, that was my worry. As soon as we went down to 9 men and you had wave after wave of attack coming out, what was already a tired Celtic team, you'd take the numbers away. You're starting to get very worried. It could be about 4 or 5. And I think people are really underrating Feyenoord. I think they're probably a better team than Lazio, that at least as far as European exploits go in recent years, I've got a top-class manager who Spurs were going after him recently. I think you think fans aren't giving Feyenoord enough credit, which makes things seem a bit better in the fact that we're standing up to them, even in the first half and in the second half when the options are reduced. I think the Feyenoord game, the last game of the group, Rodgers outlined that as an absolutely pivotal game in this group stage. The home games will be the big games. I saw a comment popping up about we need to bring it back to Fortress Parkhead again. And we do, because Parkhead hasn't been a fortress in years. I don't mean
it's been an exhibition. People want to play there now, James, because of
They
the
want to go
atmosphere.
there
They're
to
not
share
scared.
the atmosphere and get applauded off the park and etc. etc. I don't mean to talk about the team across the city, but one of the main reasons Rangers got to the Europa League final was they made Ibrox a fortress that teams didn't want to come to play to, and they would get stifled when they'd come to play there. And we need to do that again, whether you're utilising the dark arts or you're going full throttle at a team, whatever. You just need to bring Celtic Park back to being a ground where teams are scared to go, because that's where you're going to be picking up the points, because we're not going to pick them up on the road. If you look at our away record in recent years and the Champions League and in Europe in general, it's been absolutely abysmal. So it's the home games you really need to make a point of them.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And we can make a big difference in terms of the support, the atmosphere and everything else. It's just unfortunate. I don't know what the situation is going to be with tifos, which obviously don't win you games, but it adds to the occasion as well. I'm keen to bring people in on the comments. Stephen Sloan, regular contributor to the comments section on YouTube. Can we not afford experienced players, or can we not attract experienced players? Or are we only interested in young potential players? I think you need to get the mix, and we got the mix wrong. That's the way I look at it. It was even mentioned in this report. You need to have a balance of both type of signings. I think we got the balance wrong in that transfer window there. I know there's players like Bernardo that we've not seen a great deal of. Palmer, we've only seen a couple of games from him. You know, there's players like Kwon, who hasn't kicked a competitive ball for us. Tilio. There's players there we're still to see. Phillips has played a half of football. So yeah, once we get, a dozen games from each of these individual players, we might say, all right, actually, they're a wee bit better than this guy that we thought they were. But at this moment in time, we've just brought in a raft of players, and very few of them are playing as first choice players in the starting 11. Double denim, afternoon Acsom, a sobering defeat last night, but for 40 plus minutes we competed at that level. Inexperience and avoidable mistakes cost us a game, but I am firmly of the belief that we'll improve. Now, I want to ask the question, John, I'll come to you first, right? I agree with that. I think there was a period of that game, and it wasn't like the Real Madrid game that Kevin McCluskey and I covered last season, where it was like starry-eyed, wow, we're still nothing each with Real Madrid at half-time. What if McGregor's shot hadn't hit the post, or it had hit the post and gone in? What if Maida had scored that great chance? It wasn't really like that. It was as if the game plan that Brendan Rodgers had set out was in actual fact working. There was elements of the game plan, like Hitati's performance, like probably Palmer, who was really quiet, I think, until the last 10 minutes of the first half, that weren't ideal, but the game plan was working. And I guess what I'm going to ask here is, that was the blot in his copybook first time round, was Europe, naivety, going into these games, getting hammered. And for the first, I would say, more than 40 minutes, I would go right up to the red card. I felt that we were performing a lot better under Rodgers in Europe, John. So, yeah, we need to lick our wounds. We got beaten at the end of the day, and we've come out a lot worse with the suspensions and everything else. But can we pull a positive and say that Rodgers has gone away with a provincial club in England, and he's taken them into Europe, and he's actually learned a more pragmatic approach to these games?
Well, first of all, it was nice to see Haksabanovic back with a Halloween mask on, calling himself Palmer. But, yeah, very, very similar players.
Better hair. He's got better hair, Palmer.
The positives, right? Obviously, look, I've been ranting and I'm not happy about where we are because of, we haven't spent all the rest of it. But let's just leave that for a minute and, accept the fact we now are where we are. As it stands, we can do nothing about it. So are we going to get better? Absolutely. And I thought the reason why I was so pleased with that first half last night is because we didn't set up like some sort of kamikaze squadron, where we're just going to go out and lash at them and, hopefully score more than them. We were, I thought we were quite defensively sound.
Yeah.
Right throughout the team, as I say, the high press was working. The midfield was scrappy as hell. But that, again, we're the underdogs there. So scrappy as hell is what you want. You don't want them getting on the ball either. It's more important that they don't get on the ball than it is that we do get on the ball, from that point of view. So we want it to be a fight in midfield. We want the balls to be bouncing about like that, unless, we want to make it difficult. So that works in our favour, and it did work in our favour, and it was working in our favour. So I have no complaints about the way the manager set up. I thought we were very solid. I thought it was looking really good, and I thought the players, look, you can't retrospectively. This is the reason I have about 10 pages to 15 pages in notes from last night, and the reason we all do that, is because at the end of the game, the result completely shadows, your thoughts on what the game was. So you can't just throw out your notes in the first half and just say that didn't happen. We had a lot of excellent play under pressure as well, and points in that game actually. It was ridiculous. I mean, we were passing the ball back across the goal line, at certain points in the game, and it was madness. But we played out. I think it was. I don't know. I think I took notes. It was maybe 30 odd minutes. It was the first time that we didn't break the press, that we were intercepted when they were pressing and we were getting out. So we were getting out and we were playing very well. There was some great interactions with the players. The final balls weren't there. The passing wasn't accurate enough in the final third. The decision making wasn't there. But in terms of the willingness and the system, it was all there. It was all there. Now, we don't have the players that we need, I think, at the moment. But can some of these guys turn it around? I think absolutely. They haven't had much game time. And again, that comes back to the point, like, if you're buying guys and they're going to be getting into the first team, and you're saying they don't have any experience, you have to be aware of that when you're buying them.
Yeah.
There's no point in buying them in the window and then playing them in a European Cup game, a Champions League game, a couple of weeks later and saying, they're inexperienced. Well, you knew that when you bought them. So that's not an excuse. So, again, I don't blame I don't blame the players apart from home, who I do blame, because that was just, as I say, pure Begbie. And Big Gus, that's just, he's not experienced enough and he's not good enough, or not fast enough, sorry, for that. So I don't really blame him either. But I thought, going forward, what can we take from that, right? What we can take from it is we are not going to be easy to beat, right? I think that was quite clear. Now, we didn't have that many clear-cut opportunities, hardly any at all, as a matter of fact. It was probably Hitati failing to pass it to Kyogo was the best chance that never happened of the game, with a couple of saves, fairly tame stuff. But, but the first thing is, and this we've been calling for years, the start of any process is be difficult to beat.
Yeah.
And then you have to work on hitting them on the counter. And that appears to be what we're doing. And I'm delighted with that. It wasn't the result that we wanted. There was some poor play, but this is a new system. There's a lot of new players, a lot of guys, again, without the experience. Again, it's not an excuse, but that's the reality of it. And a lot of guys without a lot of minutes. So I doubt Hitati can play that badly again. I thought Turnbull might have been a bit raging for not getting on there, to be fair. I thought he could have perhaps done some damage. But again, it showed you the manager was thinking more defensively, sort of bringing on home, even though we were 1-0 down at that point. But look, I'm not going to let the result cloud the fact that there was a lot to like at certain points in that game. And I'm not going to let my frustration with the transfer window cloud the fact there's a lot to like, from that game. So, from what it is, I think we can go on. I think we can do better. Much like yourself, Paul John, I thought we might get a score draw out of last night. And I think we easily could have, if those sending-offs hadn't happened,
These are the things that you do consider after the game, because I look at the depleted nature of that, James, but we would have still had issues, right? So if you've got a full strength squad at your disposal when you're playing everybody on form, right, and Abada starts instead of Palma, Carter Vickers probably starts before Lagerbielke starts, right? Scales would have still started. you'd have still played Hitati, who wasn't 100% fit. So there would have still been some issue. You would have still been concerned at Taylor at left back. There's still issues within the team, but you would have had a stronger team, I think, obviously, with regards to all the injuries. But when we're playing them at Celtic Park, if we then approach that game with a full complement of players and we have the game plan and there's less of a naivety in terms of the game plan that Rodgers deploys in games like that, I do think that, this campaign, there's no way you can just tear it up and throw it out after that one performance last night. I'm looking at Feyenoord, their progression, because I always look at teams and think, well, I remember when you used to come up against a team like, say, Shakhtar Donetsk, and they've overlapped us a few times now. They've progressed and we've not. And then you look at the Rotterdam, the Feyenoord side, who got to the European Conference League final, and they were beaten by Roma in the final, 1-0, wasn't it? Jose Mourinho and charge Roma, and Roma had beaten Brendan Rodgers' Leicester side in the semi. So what's Feyenoord done since then? Well, they've gone on to win the league, which obviously, they're up against the PSV and they're up against Ajax, and now they're competing as a pot one team in the Champions League. So you can see the progression, James, and it's just frustrating that there seems to be a glass ceiling. We win a treble, we win a quadruple treble, and we don't go any further. And I think that's why John's frustrated, I'm frustrated, loads of people in the comments are feeling the same way. And it's about, if you can see the progression, and it's not always a hard luck story, and you can't always just say, oh, because of the injury, or we couldn't sign that player early enough, and then as fans, you're satisfied. I think there's a real dissatisfaction with it at this moment in time, the progression.
Yeah, you can point the finger at the injuries and red cards and whatever, but then it gets the transfer window that we all fall back on. You would have hoped that more would have been done, more first team quality. Take the gamble, take the risks. Mm-hmm. Is it the ghosts of your Barcasses and your Yetis that are putting the fear on the board to go and spend a bit more money on what should have been at that time real quality players? I'm not too sure, but that's 2 years in a row with the Champions League now, and if we win the league, I'm not sure what stage we're going to the qualifiers next year. I think we will have qualifiers, unless we can pull out some miracles from the Champions League this season. But if you're going to get 3 years of Champions League in a row next season, you'd expect us to, for sure, spend the money next summer. You'd expect Rodgers to really put the pressure on the board to spend the money next summer. But before the game, I predicted the score would be 3-1 to Feyenoord. I wasn't really feeling good about the game already, but I wanted to see from the game that we'd learned lessons from Rodgers' first tenure, that we'd learned lessons from Celtic's efforts in the Champions League last year. I wanted to see us being more clinical in front of goal. I don't think we created enough chances for me to see evidence that we were being more clinical in front of goal. Maeda has a decent chance. It's on his left foot, his weaker foot, so I think you can let him off with it. Hitati has an effort from range where he drives really far forward in the first half, and I thought it was a pretty tame effort. I was expecting something a bit more like his Corkery scored at Tynecastle a few years ago. Just put your laces through it, just absolutely hammer it. So we'll need to take a few more games for me to see evidence that we're a bit more clinical. But I think we saw the signs that Rodgers has learned his lessons from his first tenure as Celtic manager. You saw when there was 4 at the back, you could see how organised the defence was. They were just having to do their own role of defending. The only really scary moments were when you were, as John mentioned, you're getting the ball passed along the goal line almost. There was a couple of nervy moments, but we're really well set up. It was the defence and then the midfield just right there. I thought a headline before the game that the midfield battle was going to be the big moment. That's where Feyenoord's quality players are, and that's where on paper probably our best quality players are as well when you look at the 2 starting 11s. And I think they won that midfield battle. I think Feyenoord definitely won that midfield battle. I think Matt OReilly was one of the only players that really sort of stepped up and made himself be counted for. I don't think I saw enough from Cal McGregor in that game. I was hoping to see a bit more.
The first half, didn't he?
Yeah, he'd been returning to form the last weeks. He was good for Scotland with the international break. Even when you lose that game to England, I thought Cal McGregor was still probably the best performer in the pack for Scotland that day. Hitati has an off night as well, so I think that might be one of the positions where things went wrong. But I was encouraged by the performance of Daizen Maeda. He's a usual scapegoat, and I've seen him getting a bit of stick. I don't see where you're giving him stick. I don't think he put many a foot wrong. Most of the chances that Celtic were creating were coming when Daizen Maeda was either played over the top or played in behind the Feyenoord defenders, and that's something that we can really try and utilise against some of these teams. I don't think Lazio and Atletico Madrid have too many sort of quick or rapid defenders at their disposal. So if you can really use Diaz and Maeda to try and get at these teams in behind, then that could be sort of a real sort of point of attack for Celtic. A lot of chances were coming from Hitati driving through the middle as well. As much as might not have had the end product, the early signs were there that you can get at teams by having Hitati driving forward. So there was encouraging signs. There was signs that we'd learned lessons. So there's most definitely positives to take, although that we have been ranting just because it's a frustrating result at the end of the day. But there is positive signs for us to take from that game.
No, there are. I was surprised at Hitati being that man. I think it's something we'll actually utilise again in other Champions League games, James, where we'll have someone really pressing high up the park. But I'm surprised it wasn't Kyogo. Now, if it is Kyogo doing it right, because you know he's got the engine and he can utilise that area of the park. He was doing it earlier in the season. Do you then play someone ahead of him? And who is that someone? Is it O or is it Maeda even? It's something that I'm going to find really interesting moving forward, because I don't think that was Hitati's forte. I was really surprised to see him so high up the park. He lasted 57 minutes. I was amazed that O'Reilly lasted as long as he did, because by about the 70 or maybe the 65th minute, John, it looks as though he's running through treacle. I mean, I thought he played really well, but he looked really leggy, didn't he? And he probably lasted 10 minutes longer than I expected. And he's come off. What can you do about a player like O'Reilly, who's got the undoubted talent, but he does run out of steam at times, doesn't he?
Well, yes, and that comes back to my original point, where if you were to ask O'Reilly in private, would he say that's because he's playing with Hitati? And, you know, Hitati was having an off night. When he was having a good night before, he wasn't doing the pressing. Mm-hmm. So that's the first point I think we made. So O'Reilly, I think, feels like he's been left to do an awful lot of donkey work, and he does make some tremendous amount of recoveries. In fact, wasn't it? I can't remember what game it was. It was only a few weeks ago. Was it the Kilmarnock game where he had 7 pack recoveries? Mm-hmm. So he is recovering in positions that are dangerous for the opposition and advantageous for us. And only Odin Holm was better than him, or not near, wasn't better than him, but he only had 26 minutes to do it. I think he had 5. So anyway, so Matt O'Reilly works very, very hard. And Cal McGregor works hard. Obviously can't work as hard as he used to because he doesn't have the same amount of legs. So that means when we are playing a 3, we can't have anyone in an off game. We just can't have anyone in an off game. And Hitati was very off his game. Now, Hitati of last season, I think, really could have made hay in some positions he was in last night. There was some great chances for him to put some, those wonder ball Hitati passes through. Just beautiful, showing wonderful feet and wonderful precision. And he was so far off of that last night. And that immediately then puts pressure on O'Reilly, who was obviously knackered. And it immediately puts pressure on McGregor. So we just can't have... The bottom line is we don't have... The players aren't good enough that we can be a man down, effectively. So we just can't have that. Everyone needs to be at their peak, and he was a long way off it. And I'm not going to blame the other 2 midfielders, because I think that has a lot to do with it.
You're right. So basically O'Reilly got 10 minutes of respite, and that was when Holm came on. Hitati goes off, but then 10 minutes later, Holm gets sent off. So by the 80th minute, O'Reilly's been basically 70 minutes doing somebody else's work. No, absolutely agree with that. Now you've pointed it out. There needs to be a saying. If a footballer liked the women or the drink or whatever too much, too many nights out, they used to say George bested his career. And then if someone almost won a cup, they would Hibs it. What is it with Celtic in Europe? There's got to be a saying that it's so typical of Celtic to go into a game and just mess the whole thing up. But, you know, I'm saying that tongue-in-cheek. I do think there are positives. You know, it's difficult after the game. It's difficult the day after the game to look for positives when you're so disappointed. But I think that over the campaign, we will be able to judge it. I do believe that once the campaign's done, and Rodgers has said he wants Europe after Christmas, fair enough, we'll still be ruining certain issues, recruitment and the injury crisis and all these different things that we'll not be happy with. And it'll be really frustrating. And then we'll have to look at next season. And it's probably going to be harder, as James has already pointed out. And then we're on that cycle again. Kevin Mullen, afternoon Acsom, was proud of the players when we went down to 9 men. I totally agree with that. Kept the score down. But once again, the recruitment has let us down. The goal before halftime was so poor. Disappointing night. We need to get a video of Branco's free kick for Brazil against Scotland in World Cup 90 that was stopped by Murdo McLeod's face, and show it to Kyogo and say, this is how you stand on a wall, wee man. IFL Discovery, thanks for supporting the channel. When we fail to make the Europa, the board should be to blame. Listen, let's hope that we do have European football after Christmas. If not, then I'm pretty sure we will be talking all about it on here. Michael the Boy, what we can take from last night is that Hitati and Palmer should not have started. Clearly, you could see they were never match fit. That's on Brendan. I feel a bit sorry for Palmer, James, because he is getting a bit of stick, but I don't know if he was ready for last night. And I know that he had been playing international football in terms of minutes, but this is a big step up from what he's used to in the domestic game, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know if it's a case of match fitness. I think it's a case of fitting into the squad at the moment. He's only really played, I don't think he's played a combined 90 minutes in this Celtic team yet. So to throw him in for a Champions League game was always going to be a big ask. It was almost the equivalent of a debut in the Champions League. I think match fitness shouldn't be an issue. He just needs more minutes in the team, more minutes played alongside his teammates. And with Leila Abada out injured, there's plentiful opportunities for someone to step up and get out by the scruff of the neck. As much as Yang has impressed fans, he's not really set the world alight yet to the point where he's made that position his own. It's still up for grabs. So it'll be interesting to see who really shines on the wings this weekend, who plays this weekend. Because if someone can put in a top performance this weekend, they'll be really staking their claim in the team, especially in the wide areas.
We've hardly even looked at this weekend. I'm sure we'll have time tomorrow and on Friday to do that. Thanks, everybody, for getting involved. Lots of frustration in the comments. 1,100 strong in the live stream. One final statement coming in from Swindle. We were in the game until the sendings off. I agree with that. Keeping it at 2-0 was genuinely the only saving grace. We might look at that, and it might be pivotal when it comes to goal difference at the end of the Champions League campaign. I've got to thank everybody for getting involved. I was in a wee meeting this morning. We're talking St. Roch's versus Celtic Select, 15th of October, up at James McGrory Park. Sold out. Unbelievable. Not a ticket to be had. And I think we've only maybe announced 4 ex-Celts. We've got loads more to announce. A few surprises up our sleeves. Really looking forward to that. And Acsom will be covering the game as well. Thanks, everybody, for your support. And thank you to James McKenzie and to John Hughes for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.